In the winter of 1872, a ship was found drifting alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. She was in good condition. Her sails were set, her cargo was intact, there was food and water aboard, but there was not a single soul on her decks or below. The entire crew and the captain's wife and young daughter had vanished. They were never seen again, and the fate of the people aboard the Mary Celeste has become the most famous maritime mystery in history. This is her story. The Mary Celeste was an American merchant ship, a brigantine, that set sail from New York in early November of 1872. She was bound for Genoa in Italy, carrying a cargo of industrial alcohol in barrels. Aboard were her captain, an experienced and well-regarded seaman named Benjamin Briggs, along with his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. The rest of the company was a small crew of experienced sailors, men of good reputation. It was, by all accounts, a sound ship with a capable and sober crew. About a month later, on the 5th of December, 1872, another ship, the Dei Gratia, was crossing the Atlantic when her crew spotted a vessel ahead, moving strangely as though no one was steering her. As they drew closer, they recognized the Mary Celeste. They watched her for a time and saw no one on deck, no response to signals. Cautiously, they sent a small boarding party across to investigate. What they found has puzzled the world ever since. The Mary Celeste was deserted. There was no one aboard, living or dead. And yet, the ship was in remarkably good order. She was still seaworthy. She had taken on some water in her hold, but not a dangerous amount. The pumps were in working order. Most of her sails were set, though some were damaged. Her cargo of alcohol was almost entirely intact. There was a 6-month supply of food and fresh water aboard. The crew's personal belongings, their clothing, their valuables, were largely still in place. In other words, this was not a ship that people had abandoned in a desperate, sinking panic, grabbing what they could. Everything suggested that the people aboard had left in an orderly way, and yet had left behind everything they would need to survive and a perfectly good ship beneath their feet. The one thing that was missing was the ship's lifeboat. It appeared that the people aboard had deliberately launched the small boat and climbed into it, leaving the larger, safer ship behind. The captain's navigational instruments and some papers were also gone, suggesting a planned, if hurried, departure. But why? Why would an experienced captain and crew abandon a sound, well-provisioned ship in the middle of the ocean, climbing into a tiny lifeboat that offered far less protection? It made no sense, and that is the heart of the mystery. Over the century and a half since, theories have been proposed without end. One of the most enduring focuses on the cargo, the barrels of industrial alcohol. Some of the barrels were later found to be empty, having leaked. It is possible that fumes from the leaking alcohol built up in the hold, and that the captain, fearing an imminent explosion, ordered everyone into the lifeboat as a temporary precaution, intending to wait at a safe distance until the danger passed. If they tied the lifeboat to the ship with a rope, and that rope then broke, the people would have been left adrift in a tiny boat, while the Mary Celeste sailed on without them, eventually to drift, empty, until she was found. Stranded in the open ocean, they would have perished. Other theories have ranged widely. Some suggested a waterspout, or a sudden violent weather event that frightened the crew into abandoning ship. Some proposed a problem with the ship's pumps that made the captain wrongly believe she was sinking faster than she was. In darker theories, there was talk of mutiny, or of foul play, or of piracy, though the intact cargo and belongings argued against robbery. And in the realm of pure imagination, the case has been attributed to sea monsters, to madness, to the supernatural, none of which has any evidence at all. The disappearance also inspired enduring fiction. A young writer, who would later become famous as the creator of a great detective, wrote an embellished short story based on the case, and many of the most lurid legends, the meals still warm on the table, the cups of tea half drunk, actually come from that fiction, not from the real, sober accounts of the boarding party. Over time, the line between the documented facts and the invented details blurred, and the Mary Celeste became less a real event than a ghost story. There was even suspicion at the time directed at the men who found her. When the Dei Gratia brought the Mary Celeste into port to claim a salvage reward, the authorities grew suspicious of how the abandoned ship had come to be found in such good order. An official inquiry was held, and for a time there were dark hints that the salvage crew might have been involved in foul play, perhaps having attacked the original crew. But no evidence of violence was ever found aboard. No blood, no signs of struggle, and the theory collapsed. The men of the Dei Gratia were never charged, but the cloud of suspicion lingered over them, an injustice born of a mystery no one could explain. What truly defeats every theory is the combination of details. Any single explanation can account for some of the facts, but not all of them at once. A fear of explosion explains why they might leave temporarily, but not why an experienced captain would risk his family in a tiny boat on the open Atlantic. A storm explains damage, but not the orderly state of the ship. Each idea solves part of the puzzle and stumbles on the rest. It is this stubborn refusal to fit any neat answer that has kept the Mary Celeste alive in the imagination for so long. But the real event is mysterious enough. A sound ship, found drifting and empty, her people gone into a lifeboat and then into oblivion. Captain Briggs was known as a careful, capable man. Whatever made him give the order to leave his own ship must have seemed, in that moment, like a matter of life and death. And yet by leaving, he and everyone with him met their deaths, while the ship they fled sailed safely on. The people of the Mary Celeste were never found. No bodies, no lifeboat, no survivors, no message. The ocean took them as completely as if they had never existed, leaving behind only the empty ship as a clue and a question that has lasted for 150 years. What terror, real or imagined, drove the crew of the Mary Celeste from their sound and seaworthy ship into a tiny boat and to their deaths? We may never know.